I'm Shruti Bharath. In 2021, I had my beautiful son, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But I also realized that it was an emotional roller coaster. I wasn't ready for all the changes that happened within me and all of my relationships. But I also realized I am not alone. I accessed a lot of great content during this time, but realized that there just wasn't enough from an Indian context. And I want to do something to change that. Last year, I set up Beyond the Bump, which is a fully volunteer-run platform. And as part of the content offerings of this platform, I'm starting a new podcast called Bump In. It's an opportunity to meet a lot of everyday parents who share their stories of how they're not only surviving, but thriving inside and after the 0 to 24 month phase. So join me as we talk about the highs, lows, the madness, and the inevitable challenges with some laughter sprinkled in between. Be sure to listen all the way till the end for some important takeaways and some resources that might help support your journey. See you soon. Hi, Janvi. Welcome to the podcast Bump In. So happy to have you and your son with us today. I hope we can have a good conversation, all three of us, and talk about your journey as a mom. So welcome.
Say thanks. Thank you, Shruti. It's been a pleasure. I think knowing that you're doing something so different from what is available out there in terms of content, it's important for other mothers, new mothers, or prospective mothers to hear some of the real experiences that parents go through. It's really important. So I'm happy to be a part of this.
Thank you, Janvi. I think I was particularly passionate about talking or at least giving more voice to some of the Indian experiences. And I do recognize that this is still quite an urban, experience that we're all having. And hopefully, I can also start to tell stories from, other cities and regions and such. But we'll take it a step at a time. So, like I do with most conversations, I'd love to start with a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit of your story and how we got here? I know you have two beautiful children, so do tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Okay, so I am Janvi. I completed my PhD. I'll tell you a little bit about my professional journey. I completed my PhD in 2016. I am a Mumbaiker. I grew up here. Moved to Spain on a fully funded fellowship in 2010. Post the fellowship, I moved from Spain to the US, where I had some really diverse experiences, and moved back to India sometime in 2018.
Yeah.
And since then, we've had two kids. COVID-19, the first kid, we had was in the first wave. But because we are a little bit older, we decided to have a second one, at 2 years and 3 months. When my daughter was 2 years and 3 months, I was. So yeah, it's been quite a journey to have two under 3. I think overall this is how we wanted it, and yeah, we are quite happy. Here comes my daughter.
Hi. I love how both the kids have made it into the recording with us.
Yeah, I know.
So, Janvi, you were sharing with me that you have chosen and you made this choice actively with your husband to have two children pretty quickly together. And I can imagine it hasn't been easy to have two children under 3. I'm sure they're absolutely wonderful, and there's no doubt about that. Kids are great. But what has this meant for you and your husband as parents? How has this journey treated you overall? Going through a pandemic with your first one, the second one coming soon after. How has that been for the two of you?
Oh wow, that's a very loaded question, because frankly, I think nobody prepares you for one kid. Forget two kids.
Yeah.
I think it's a very complex experience. Um, to suddenly go from being a couple. We were together for almost 7 years before we had our first kid.
Yeah.
So we had traveled everywhere together by ourselves, and we were relaxed. We weren't really like the type to bicker too much. And I think that having a kid just takes the competitive levels to do it right to another level. Like, I think that overall, actually, the second kid surprisingly relaxed us quite a bit, because the parenting part, the the nitty gritties of parenting, the scientific piece of parenting is fairly more sorted.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the time management and the work management that becomes a little bit complicated with the second one, because there's still
Yeah.
the first one that you're continuously, you know, trying to manage in some ways,
Yeah, yeah. The
right? So
logistics become harder basically
yeah,
with
yeah, correct.
two little ones. Yeah. Hmm.
So I think that, yeah, that's the problem, I think. But other than that, I think the second time parenting is a breeze in comparison.
Yeah, I think because you know your way around some of
Yeah.
the stuff, and you also take things maybe a little less seriously
Yes.
than you did the first time around. I can totally relate, Janvi. I think my husband and I as well chose to have children pretty late into our marriage. Late by whatever standard
Mm.
convention.
Indian standards, yeah.
Yeah, we'd been married 8, 9 years, so there wasn't any rush to get into this, and I think we came about this decision pretty late, again by most standards. So I completely relate. And getting into it, I too had my son in 21, which is pandemic. I mean, these are all pandemic babies, so you come into this already with a bit of paranoia built into it, because you're trying to not fall sick, you're trying to have a safe
Mm.
pregnancy, and then you get into that with an elevated anxiety in general.
Yeah.
What were some of the big changes you felt in yourself in your first few months, given your second child is 15 months, so it's a little
Mm.
bit more recent? What were those initial months like for you post birth?
I think it was full of paranoia. I mean, that's what my husband says. When my daughter was born, um, he only remembers me crying. The first three
Wow.
months, I was only crying. And
Right.
obviously, I sought help because I thought this is so abnormal. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
happy, and yet I can't help feeling so anxious. And I've
Yeah.
been pretty open about this with a lot of new mothers, because I feel like, of course, everyone's experience is different,
Yeah.
and as you said, COVID kind of layers a lot of anxiety. And 2020, we didn't know about the vaccines, we didn't know about
Absolutely.
anything. And it felt so claustrophobic, being stuck at home and not knowing when this is going to end.
Yeah.
So I think my first 3 months of being a first time mother were traumatic.
Wow.
um, I don't think that I would describe them as as rosy and beautiful, like it is often touted as to be. But the second time, it was actually fairly lovely, and
Yeah.
I got to experience the beauty of having a newborn and seeing them go through their motions. Also, because it's the last child you're going to have. They grow up really quickly. You can see the horizon.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you have the first one, you can't see that horizon, and it feels like a lot, especially when you're not able to rationally kind of go through your own feelings
Yeah.
that well.
No, absolutely. That thank you for sharing that and being so open and honest about your experience. So I wanted to share something with you, Janvi. I talk to a lot of people about what I'm trying to do here through Beyond the Bump, and sometimes I get the response from certain people who are also parents that I don't know what the big deal is. It's not really that hard, you know. Are we? Do you think? And I'd love your perspective here. Do you think that it's hard for everyone, or is it harder for some of us who are probably more in touch with our own feelings, or are probably more sensitive in general? Do you think there is a difference there, or is it hard for everyone, and it's just that some of us just know what to call it?
Interesting question. because I've been on the other spectrum, being on a lot of the moms group where, people
Yeah.
are so paranoid about every single thing, that their
Yeah.
child does or that they do. But yeah, I think that my parents, definitely made me feel like, what's the big deal? Like everyone has kids, and
Yeah.
they were very empathetic, but they definitely made me feel like, so this is how life is, but the truth is that having kids in our generation is a choice. It's not like
Correct.
everyone decides to have kids, and totally respect people who decide not to have kids and focus on their lives, their travel, their careers, their just their journey.
Correct.
So, the moment you decide to have kids, a lot of these, things that you had envisioned in your career, I, it's not like those are going to go away magically. You still feel very ambitious about what you want to achieve with your life.
Absolutely.
But then to that you add this layer of complexity of having to raise kids and doing it well, doing it, in the most human way possible.
Correct.
And here comes your, your huge problem that that becomes like your kryptonite. You don't know what to do, and that's the issue that I think this generation of people, including me, we want to have it all. But the truth is, the hard reality that parenting teaches you is that you cannot have it all. You just have to be good enough at it, and that's
Correct.
okay. And in some
Absolutely.
ways, if I wasn't a parent, I don't think I would have accepted this at at my age. I would have accepted it maybe a little bit later on, and I'm just happy that I have been pushed into this
Yeah.
right now.
No, you shared so many things that I really want to dive into. So I think I'll start with one of them. This is a conversation I'm having with a lot of women I'm speaking to as part of the podcast. And I think it's particularly a hallmark of those of us who are choosing to have children in our 30s, right? Because we've also brought our careers to a certain point. There's a lot of ambition. I don't think there's any lack of wanting to be the best there. But there's also this unique pressure that we seem to put on ourselves is to be the best at everything, to be the best mother, to be the best partner, to be the best at work, whatever work looks like, business, your own startup, like working for an organization. And I think, at least in my case, my experience has been year one, put a lot of put me really in the center of my own ego and really challenge some of these views I had about myself and what I'm capable of and what the meaning of best and good. And it was a real identity shift. It was hard when I was going through it, but now that I'm a bit on the other side of it, I really like the person I'm becoming. So I wanted to understand from you, what have those shifts meant? Like you talked about the fact that you're really happy you've had these realizations now and not, further down the road. But talk about that journey for you. What was that identity shift like, especially with two? Because I think it compounds. I don't think one child is the same as two children because
Yeah.
it's more to handle and more work you're doing on yourself while wanting to be really great at everything, right? So talk about your identity shifts and how you've made
Yeah.
peace with the good enough.
I was just trying to remember a quote where, yeah, I think I was watching this meme or a clip or something where they said that with one kid, with two kids, you're more like a chaperone. You're not.
You're not a
you
parent.
Yeah, you're not an entertainer. You're not like the
Yes.
entertainer of the circus. You're just a
Yeah.
chaperone. They entertain each other. There's a lot of chaos, and you kind of. Anyway, the talk about the identity, I think there's definitely a little bit of solidifying that role that you have as a parent. When you have two, when you have one, there is still a lot of struggle.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, you send this kid away, to the grandparent, or and you will get your life back. When you have two, there is no getting your life back.
Right.
The kids are your life, and
Yeah.
they will become a part of pretty much everything that you do, You go to a
Right.
supermarket, your children are there. You go to the park, they're there. You go for a walk, and not because they are there, because you want to spend time with them. You want
Correct.
to kind of make sure that these moments that go away so fast, you're able to maximize and kind of give them that perspective of how you were when they were little.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that pretty much sums it up.
Got it. Janvi, the decision that you made to take a break from work and focus more on family, how did you come upon this decision, and what would you advise people in a similar cusp, right, who are
Um,
considering it?
Yeah, no, so this is not the first break. So, I would say that, you know, I, I've taken multiple like breaks post maternity. So, after the year, I worked for a year at the same company and I was very happy. But then I started getting burnt out because a lot of the hours were West Coast, US West Coast hours, and I wanted to do something more research, and this job was taking me away from that. So I started doing a little bit of consulting. And then I got into a really nice non-profit. But then the first month I joined them, I got pregnant again. So amazingly, I was doing so well in that job,
Yeah.
but again, I took a 6 month maternity leave, and after that, it was so taxing because my husband was also in a very, very, you know, um, very demanding job at that time. So I decided that I'll extend my maternity leave for 9 months. But then the same organization offered me a better position, but they said that you may have to travel for a couple of days, and that was again a big issue for me. So I moved to my last job, which I just recently quit.
Right.
So I think that overall, I've not had so many like shifts in switching roles and jobs. But I think what does happen a lot is that you're trying to do it all,
Yeah.
and you are also progressing in your career. I think Indra Nui said it that unfortunately the time that you have kids is also the time when your careers are taking off. And that pretty much sums it up for me. I think that I kept progressing in my career, but I also felt like so much of the family life was being taken over by somebody else, which is fine for the time being, but you got to find a balance. And I'm in that process of introspection where I'm like, what does that kind of a balance look like, right?
Yeah.
I mean, where am I going from here? So the break is more like an introspective break. I'm creating documents for myself. I'm finishing up old publications. I'm not like, I just am incapable of just sitting and saying, hey, I'm just going to be a housewife, because I have no skills of being a housewife. So yeah.
So it's. I think what you're telling me is this hasn't been. It wasn't really very organic. It happened. I mean, rather, it wasn't really very deliberate. It's been very
Yeah.
organic. You
Yeah.
had to take breaks. You had to slow down, as you are right now as well. I'm gonna ask you a controversial question, right? And you can share what comes to mind. How much of this, this pull we feel, to say, okay, how do you juggle, how do you balance, because the balance piece is also very specific to the individual. How much of this we feel is pressure we put on ourselves, in the sense that there is an image we have about what our career should be and where we should be in it, and then you have a family, and both these time periods happen to overlap just because of biology.
Right.
What if it waited? What if the career could wait? What do you think that would really do to the entire
Yeah. The
situation?
career can wait. I mean, I don't feel any specific pull, because see, I think that um, overall, I think that career can wait, but your mind that is racing in the way at the pace that it is, and the way in which you kind of are used to, have it been engineered over the last
Yeah.
years, of thinking about your work, of contributing to something a little bit more than the household.
Yeah.
It's I cannot imagine, undoing that engineering.
Yeah,
Right, so
absolutely.
I can slow down, and that's my aim, that I am not going to make work my life, which is why I'm not at all looking at full-time opportunities from this point on. In 2024, I want to focus on, you know um, eating better, working out, spending quality time with the kids, and also working, but not, making work my life, not leaving everything aside and saying, hey, you know what, I'm just going to um,
Yeah.
let the kids do what they want, and then I'll circle back. You cannot circle back because they're gone.
No, I get it. And the perspective from which I ask this question is because this is a question I come up with a lot of the folks I speak to. So there was I just earlier today was speaking to a young woman who's also a mother of a 6-month-old. And she is extremely restless in terms of having a bit of an identity crisis in
Yeah.
terms of where she was in her trajectory and how things are slowed down now. And I think in your early days of being a mother, it's a very busy bored time, right? You're always busy, but you're actually bored. I mean, we have to call a spade a spade. It is a lot of repetition, and the days become months, and a month becomes a year. I remember reading something saying the years are short, but the days are long.
Oh,
And
this.
I completely relate to that experience, and I could hear it. I hear it in her voice every time I speak. And I told her, look, I mean, I fully respect the fact that you want to pursue what gives you that mental, satisfaction and purpose, and more power to you, right, to do that. But we're also really replaceable pretty much everywhere else, barring the family, right? And I think sometimes just knowing that and giving yourself the grace to take the time for it is so important. And I say this, by the way, after having my own share of enough struggles in this space. I am regularly considering whether I'm doing enough with my son, or I'm doing enough at work. And I think I went through that wrestle a lot last year, and I'm lucky to have enough support to be able to still continue to do everything, including make time for what we're doing right now. And I really consider that a privilege. But this is not an easy decision, and I think for me, a takeaway from so many conversations with wonderful people like yourself is that you have to do what's right for you and your family, right? You have to consider what makes you tick, what makes you happy, what makes you feel alive, so that you are able to be that person that you need to be for the kids that you have, right? Because there is no perfect picture mother that will show up, and the fuel has to come from somewhere. If that fuel comes from working out, or comes from having a certain type of job, or whatever that may be, I think that's what you have to give yourself, right? And that's kind of what I'm learning through conversations. Janvi, I want to shift the conversation a little bit to you talked a little bit about how your first child and how you were not like yourself. You were a lot more emotional than you'd been in.
Depressed. I mean, definitely
Absolutely.
some form of depression for sure.
I want to double click into that and understand what you did to help yourself in that time period, and
Yeah.
what you would advise women who are feeling that way. What to look out for, and what you'd recommend doing to help yourself, given
Yeah.
now we're hopefully out of a pandemic, and we can go and meet with people and get the kind of support we need.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
suggest there?
Yeah, I think this is a cause that I feel very strongly about, because I mean, not that this happens to everyone, but if it does happen, you need to have the tools to
Yeah.
work through this. So I think the immediate thing is I joined a support group. In the
Okay.
pandemic, there was a friend of mine whose cousin was running a really fantastic support group of 4 or 5 women, and there was so many interesting like concepts that I had not learnt about, like diastasis recti, that about of focusing on your body and how you also change. And so one of the things that I did was join the support group, but the more important thing was a lifestyle change that I made.
Okay.
I think this concept, because the breastfeeding part, we never discussed that. The breastfeeding part is so hard, and you just
It
feel
is.
like, you are in your nightgown at different times of the day, and it just feels like one long day and night. So I started, wearing iron clothes during the day, and my night clothes at night, making sure that even though it was the pandemic, I'd at least go for a walk on my floor.
Yeah.
I would call a friend every 2 3 days, give the kid to somebody and call them and see how are you doing. So get to know, get a little bit of an insight into other people's life and get some perspective. And importantly, I reached out to somebody who practices cognitive behavioral therapy, which worked for me. It really worked for
Fantastic.
me. They did not recommend any antidepressant pills, but they recommended a framework,
Yeah.
where I was able to think about how I was feeling through a rational lens. And, a lot of my anxious thoughts back then were things like, oh, there's a nanny and I think she loves the baby too much. She's engaging the baby too much, or, the baby spending too much time with my in-laws, or, I don't think I'm creating enough breast milk, and, I need to kind of I feel very guilty about giving formula, or I think that I need to spend a lot more time reading about what my baby is going through, so she doesn't miss her milestones. All
Yeah.
of these are crazy thoughts. Looking back, I didn't do any of this with my son, because I was like, this is pointless. Like, you can't control anybody. You can't. All you need to do is to be able to control how you're feeling and be happy in this moment, in whichever way you can be.
Yeah.
So I think, it was important. It was a very intentional way of being from that point on.
Yeah.
And I think that framework has helped me not just with parenting, but with everything else in my life.
Absolutely. No, this is such a wonderful thing to share, and thank you for being so open about it. I think the what you're referring to in terms of just this influx of so many thoughts, right? Am I doing enough? Is this right? I think for me, I also had an experience of some intrusive thoughts, right? Worried about the safety of my child. When I would travel in the airport, I felt myself feeling a little bit like that character from Lord of the Rings, with the precious and the like. Sometimes I felt I really looked like that, or I was behaving that way, and it when and the worst part is when you're doing that and you're going through that. I don't know about you, but you're also judging yourself for being that way,
Yeah.
which is like a double whammy. You're you're already under resourced, and why would you want to like judge your own self? So I think the hindsight, obviously hindsight is always 2020. You're saying let's like push the brakes on this judgment, right? It's okay to have a gap in what you're usually like, and be somebody else for a bit while you're transitioning, right, into a new identity. And I'm so glad you shared that you went through some of this and how you sought support, because I did some of this too. I think my version of the change was not I felt very alone because I was in a different country, and I'd moved
Okay.
there with my new baby, so I felt completely isolated. Like days and nights all seemed to blur into each other. And I think the best form of support is going out and getting it. So that really worked for me as well.
Yeah.
So Janvi, there's a question I have that I ask almost everyone I talk to. If there was a myth on parenting, particularly in the early phase, right? Because parenting is a lifelong experience, but I'm talking more about the first 2 years. If there was a myth you had the power to bust or do away with completely, what would that be?
Having a child is an optional exercise. If you decide to have children, then you are in it 100% of the time, whether you want it or not. But if you choose not to have a child, that's perfectly fine. You're not missing out on anything, I mean, if it comes from within as a couple or as a single person or whatever, you make that choice. But it's fine if you decide not to have kids. There are so many other challenges that will await you in your life.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is it's a choice, and if you're making the choice, either way, you're fine. You're going to be fine, but you got to be all in some sense. So
Yeah.
if you choose to have children, it's really about being sort of committed to it in the best way possible, while giving yourself some grace as well through the journey. My last question to you is, for parents who are entering this journey, whether it's their first or second or others, resources that they could probably look at, that really helped you, in your education, in those early days.
Yeah, I think that definitely resources. I would say that I read this fantastic book called Crib Sheet
Yeah.
by Emily Oster, and that book has evidence-backed information on pretty much everything in the first year of the child's birth.
Yeah.
She also wrote another book called Expecting Better about pregnancy, which is also lovely. But I think the first year of giving birth, there are so many myths that that you are being that are being shoved into your face all the time. Like, for example, breastfeeding is so lovely. It's not for some people, and let's please accept that. Second, if there were studies that were done which compared breastfeeding with better IQ. It's
Yeah.
all BS. This book specifically outlines that the best thing that breastfeeding can do is, in fact, improve the short-term health of the child
Yeah.
and long-term health of the mother, because there are better chances of you not, being detected with breast cancer
Breast
if you
cancer.
breastfed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other than that, I mean, I think there were so many things that I read in that book that really opened my eyes to the fact that what you are told, you need to examine that closely,
Yeah.
and it starts with parenting.
Makes sense. So, Janvi, how I end a lot of these conversations, given that they're fairly serious, is to take a moment for levity. With two kids and a lot of experience under your belt, surely you had some real laugh out loud moments with them where you or them did something hilarious that you'd want to share. So, is there any moment that comes to mind?
Oh yeah, my husband had created something called hashtag poop stories, which is
Okay.
really really hilarious with my daughter.
Okay.
And we shared it with a lot of our friends. Like, okay, two like really disgusting poop stories, but I won't get into
Sure.
too much detail. One was that every time he tried to clean her diaper, she would invariably try and poop. And
Wow.
second was this one time we were trying to transition both kids into our bedroom.
Yeah.
And around 3 o'clock, I am changing my son's diaper, and he decides to poop, and it was disgusting. It was all over the room, and then my daughter is up, my husband is up, this kid is crying, and both kids want me while we're trying to clean up the entire mess in the room. Oh my gosh, it was so hilarious. I think we both were like, I think this is a 3 a.m. laugh that we definitely needed.
Yeah, I can imagine. Any story that involves that time of the day and this much poop is probably gonna be. I mean, it's gonna be funny after it happened, not
Of
not as
course,
much
not in the
during.
moment. You're like,
Yeah. Do you have pictures to remember the moment, or it's
oh,
all just in your memory?
I don't think we have any pictures. Like, I'd rather not remember this in pictures for sure,
Yeah.
or in any other way except the narrative.
Sure, sure. Janvi, this has been great. Thank you. I know this hasn't been easy with both the kids obviously needing you. It's a Saturday. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'm sure a lot of women, a lot of parents who hear this are going to have a lot to relate to, especially with respect to, what you shared regarding those tough moments in the early days, and also the decision to have two, which is not an easy one to do,
Shocking.
right? Yeah, not really. I keep telling people, you'd think that I'd be deterred. I am even more enthusiastic about children now than I've ever been in my life before. I love them, love them. So
Yeah.
I share your passion for more than one child for sure.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, Shruti. Thanks so much, and good luck with the podcast.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Janvi. I wanted to share some important takeaways from the discussion. Remember, postpartum depression can happen to the very best of us. While baby blues is pretty normal, it is different from postpartum depression. Hormonal changes, exhaustion, breastfeeding challenges are few of the reasons for that initial anxiety and low energy. But postpartum depression may occur even up to a year after giving birth, with symptoms such as anxiety, crying, lack of bonding, and even self doubt. Please get help. Apart from support at home and getting enough sleep and nutritious meals, it's important to get help from practitioners, including options such as psychotherapy, medication, and even peer support groups. Don't worry if expectations are not met all the time, you're doing the best you can. Taking breaks from work does not signal the end of our career. Remember, parenting is just as important as your career. In fact, some articles state that the mental and emotional labor involved is equivalent to managing a Fortune 500 company. Remember, you're doing a great job. Think of joining mom groups, self-reflection, and practicing gratitude. You have to do what works best for you and your family emotionally and financially, but you can still go easy on yourself as your career is much stronger than you think. Remember, having a baby really does change us, so we do have to show up for ourselves and our little ones with grace and compassion. Think of many of the following suggestions, including using your friends and family for support. Remember, you are not alone. Taking time for yourself, even if it's 15 minutes every day to do something that reminds you of your old self, is so important. Don't be in a rush to bounce back, and remember, you can also seek support through counseling and therapy. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Bump In.